The horses that we're having in this bomb-proofing clinic are all Mustangs. There are a couple of them that 3 weeks ago had never even been handled before. The demonstration horse that we had, the big white horse, had been handled before, but he'd never seen anything like this before. It's the first time he's been to an event like this. And that's the same for several of the other horses. They've been in a very confined environment, a very kind of sheltered environment. Bomb-proofing started with the volunteers down at KBR in Knightson. And we had a little horse course set up out there, but everything was pretty much stayed the same. They came up with the idea of changing things around and coming up with new obstacles that they could invent from stuff that was laying around the stable or things they picked up at the lumber yard or at Walmart, and constantly change the obstacles and how the course looked. So the horses would have to respond to each obstacle as something a little bit new. It's kind of like when you go out on a trail ride and a couple of things have changed, or there's an old car parked there, or there's a dumpster in a new place, or a tree's falling down. You know, the horses kind of get disturbed because they've memorized how the things look. So these guys came up with some stuff that was portable, and you could change it. And the horses tended to become interested in, oh, this is new, what's this all about? Rather than react and be frightened about new and different looking things. When we set up the bomb-proofing obstacles, we set them in kind of a progressive order, from very simple to rather challenging and complicated. And the different elements in the bomb-proofing approach different aspects of the horse's perception. It's important to master the obstacles in sequence. Kind of like if you're trying to teach a young child to swim, you don't take them up to the high dive and throw them off. Now you can probably do that, and the child will figure out how to keep its head above water and get to the side of the pool, but it's not going to like the experience very much, and it may be frightened about, you know, swimming in the water for some time to come. We want the horses to go through and get comfortable with each element before it proceeds to the next element. When the horse has difficulty with an obstacle, we'll go back to the previous obstacle, patch up where we were, get the horse comfortable again, then we'll attack the more difficult obstacle. As long as we can maintain the horse's confidence, then the horse is likely to pay attention to our cues, be aware of everything that's going on around him, and make the right decisions. What we're trying to work out is confidence for both the handler and the horse. Trust between the horse and the handler. We're not going to ask you to do anything that you can't handle. Forward motion. We want to get that forward motion going. We also want lateral control. The horse needs to be able to focus on all these things that are going on and still not get into our space or drift off in the wrong direction. You know, kind of stay connected with us. There's a little bit of a synergy that works here. The horse looks to the handler, and as these things kind of develop, the handler starts looking to the horse. And when they get that two-way communication is when it's really looking good. The handler can trust the horse. The handler can see the horse is a little bit edgy, but the horse knows that the handler's not going to ask him to do anything he can't handle. But the handler also knows that the horse is going to tell him when he's kind of absorbed everything, he's processed it, and he's ready to go forward. He can deal with all these unusual things in the human environment, investigate, and if the handler thinks that it's okay and communicates to the horse that it's okay, and the horse has learned to trust that the handler's not going to ask him to do something that's going to hurt him or that he can't handle, the horse is generally willing to do just about anything. And then it's our responsibility from that point on not to put a horse in a position where he's going to get hurt. We now have a responsibility to be the safety mechanism or the safety warden for the horse. Because when we're involved with something, the horse is going to start to assume that it's safer than it would be if he hadn't been desensitized through things like the bomb-proofing. The first elements that we have in bomb-proofing are ground elements. We have to start simple. We have to get the horse to start responding to us and get in a habit of relaxing and looking down. When the horse enters the labyrinth, he's entering a relatively small space. He's got to keep a position with the handler so that he's not knocking the handler over or he's not stepping out of the bounds. This is a wide enough boundary that the horse can handle it without too much stress or without too much complication. We try to set these things up so the horse can do right. But the horse has to come up to the turn, make a 180-degree turn, not get his hind feet hung up on the poles, come back and make a 180-degree turn in the opposite direction. So he's got to pay attention to where the poles are. He'll figure out pretty quick we're asking him to stay inside the poles. Once he understands he needs to stay inside the boundaries of the poles, he needs to maintain position with the handler. He's got to adjust his speed when he comes to the 180-degree turn. As he's following the handler around, he needs to keep track of his hind end and come around so that he's not clanking into the pole as he makes the turn. At the same time, the handler needs to be aware of the horse, and if the handler notices that the horse is coming up short, he needs to make an adjustment and coach the horse around so that he's not stumbling into the poles. We're making turns toward the handler, we're making turns away from the handler. The horse needs to move away from the handler's space, still stay focused on the poles. The dimensions, not running into the poles with their feet, not running into the handler, not pulling away from the handler, staying quiet. The fact that there's different things for the horses to process is important, because if we do this at a rate that the horse can understand, he's going to realize that this is really not that complicated. This is just a series of simple steps. If I follow my handler's cues, it's easy. The handler needs to be smart enough that if the horse starts getting a little bit anxious or the horse starts forging ahead, you stop him. You let him relax, you let him fix it, and you go through it. And we do it from both sides. We lead from both sides of our horse. We start with the easy side until the horse gets used to the dimensions, and then we come back through both directions doing the hard side. Because the horse will be easy on one side, the horse is going to have more difficulty on the other side. If he can learn that no matter where you are, when you ask him to follow a particular path through a series of obstacles or even the brush country out there, he'll develop confidence that he'll be comfortable and everything will be right as long as he just follows those basic familiar cues. Once the horse has the larger dimension of the labyrinth worked out, and he's not stepping on the handler's feet or stepping out of bounds, and he's got the concept, follow my handler in the dimension, we'll go to another obstacle that we call the narrow mountain trail. The narrow mountain trail is about 18 inches wide between the poles, and the poles go in kind of a random zigzag pattern. The narrow mountain trail is decreasing the dimension that the horse has to work with. Since there's a lot more forward motion, the horse can start adjusting himself to a tighter dimension. It's kind of a refinement process. Plus, there's quite a bit of length. The narrow mountain trail is probably 70 to 80 feet long. The mental imagery for the handler is that one side or the other is a cliff. You step off the pole, you fall down the cliff. So we're going to stay within bounds. He and the handler have to really start focusing on working together, leading lightly, stay with the handler. Don't get in the handler's space. Work off the handler's cue. The handler is now guiding the horse through some more subtle turns. Once the horse and the handler get down the narrow mountain trail a couple of times, being led from both sides, then the horse is getting a little bit more tuned up and refined perspective of where he is with the handler. We progress from that to what we call the waterfall, typically with something that's very simple, and then one that's a little more challenging. We'll come up to either hoops or PVC structures that have streamers or flags and sometimes bells and other things hanging from the top that if the horse has his head fully up, we're going to brush across his face. Typically, the horse is going to raise his head and his eyes are going to get big, and it's, what's this? This is something completely different. We don't want the horse to fixate on something that's unusual. We want horses to look at new and strange things as items of curiosity rather than items of fear. This is part of your environment. Be cautious, but don't be afraid. We want to get the horse to discover stimulus from other directions other than underfoot can also easily be processed, and the horse can figure out that it's safe. If you're leading a horse into a situation that makes him uncomfortable, he's going to tend to shy away from that object or stimulus that frightens him. If you're in a position where the horse is between you and that stimulus, if the horse gets startled too much, he's going to come over the top of you. And then you end up with a fight trying to beat the horse out of your space. Stand between the horse and whatever it is that disturbs him. And two things happen. One is if the horse needs a little bit of extra distance to check something out, he's stepping away from you. Plus, by putting ourselves there, just the same as the wild stallion will put himself between his band and a newcomer or something that disturbs him, that's a confidence builder. Hey, I'm looking out for you. I'm going to be between you and whatever you're afraid of. And you'll watch horses, they'll look around the trees, they'll look around another horse, they'll look around the edge of the building if they're not sure of something. They'll look around you and they'll study it. And as long as they're more curious than afraid, they'll process it, and you can impart to them that this is really nothing to get disturbed about to the point you've got to dance around and run away. In the horse's viewpoint, the handler is confident and moving forward. And from the horse's viewpoint, if we get him to relax and get his head positioned, he's going to really be focusing on the handler itself. These other things should just be peripheral stimulus over his head. We're not going to pull on the horse. We're not going to try to drive the horse through. We want to have this horse come through with our presence or with our communication. That gives the horse confidence that, hey, yeah, if I relax, I can get through these things. When we confront the horse with new and challenging things, if we can remind the horse, if you kind of drop in with us and relax, get a couple of nice strokes, this is really a comfortable place to be. It's just different. Pretty soon the horse realizes that he can see there's the other side of this obstacle. This isn't just a dangling wall that he can't pass through. And he's focusing again on the handler, and he's watching the handler's body and the handler's feet, and he goes under the obstacle, and it's not much of a problem. Sometimes they'll squirt just a little bit as they pick up the streamer behind their eyes. So we go back through and we try it 2 or 3 more times. Get the horse to relax and drop his head and work with the handler. Typically by the 2nd or 3rd time, he'll stop, but then he's going to investigate the thing and he's going to sniff at it, and it's going to be a curiosity and nothing to fear. As the horse gets more comfortable with these things, we're going to progress to the most complicated of the visual stimulus, and that's flag alley. Oftentimes before we put a horse through flag alley, we'll have him go by some little fluttering flags and what we call the goonie birds. If the horse bumps at the head, bobs up and down, and things like that, to just kind of get him used to things kind of moving around him in 3 dimension. What we do with flag alley is we've got a lane that's about 50 feet long, and it can be from 4 to 6 feet wide with streamers or flags and different things hanging on either side. They're fluttering and creating a visual distraction, and we set the flags about even with the horse's eye level. This is a lot of stimulation, and it's coming from both sides. We want to have the alley wide enough that the horse that we're working with, if he gets really torqued out for some reason and needs to come back out, he can turn around and come out without knocking the flags over. Other than that, we'd like to have the alley as confining visually as possible. To make the horse focus more on things other than just racing through the flag alley, which they normally would, we're going to throw some scary things on the ground. We'll dump out a bag of recycled plastic bottles. We'll dump out a bag of crushed recycled soda cans. At the end of it, we've got a big plastic or canvas tarp. Things that out in the open, the horses would go, wow, you know, that's pretty strange. Well, what we've done now is we've combined a bunch of different stimulus. We are going back to the original pattern of the horse needs to deal with things on the ground. At the same time, the horse has got things alongside of it. And we're going to walk through. We're going to spread these things apart far enough so that the horse gets a little bit anxious about one particular element within flag alley. He's got a little bit of timeout space between that element and the next, even though the flags are flapping on either side. We can reassure him and say, hey, you did a great job. And if we need to turn him around, we can, and we'll go back and forth over that particular element. So we'll go through the plastic bottles, and they're going to kick the bottles around, and they're going to step on one, and it's going to crackle, and it's going to disturb them a little bit. And sometimes with a really nervous horse, we need to go in and step on the bottles a little bit ourselves, and they can kind of see what it's like and get down and get curious about it. Then we're going to lead them through. Oh. Then they're going to go over the crushed cans. And then usually by the time they get to the tarp, which is, you know, the bane of a lot of horses trying to be trained, they go, okay, a tarp, boy, that's easier than those other things. And they walk right over the tarp. And then we're going to go back and forth until the horse is completely comfortable. And we'll maybe change how the elements are scattered out within flag alleys, so it's not just rote repetition. Once the horses get through that and they realize, you know, that was a lot of stuff, but it was actually pretty cool, usually they'll stop and they'll sniff the cans and they'll kind of tug at the little flags to see what they're like. They're curious about that environment. So the next time somebody comes riding down the road and there's a plastic bag flying by or something like that, the horse isn't so afraid of the rustling plastic that he runs out in front of a speeding car. So it's a matter of letting the horse know that, you know, if we say this is pretty cool, they're going to be able to get control of their emotions. Horse is an emotional animal. They can control those emotions and invest the energy more into curiosity and in that baseline response of confidence, trust in the handler, trust in the environment. You take a young child into the woods, tie a rope to him and drag him through the woods with all these strange things around him, he's going to be pretty frightened. But if we put our arm around him and say, son, check this out. This is what this is what that is. That's a bear over there, and we're going to kind of stay clear of him, you know, but this is a fox, and he's kind of cute, and we can walk by him and he's not going to hurt us, and don't worry about the birds flapping in the trees. And the young child will get an appreciation rather than a fear of this strange environment. Well, in a sense, that's the attitude we're using with the horses. We're going to coach them through it. Hey, this is really pretty cool. This can be interesting. This is kind of the amusement park for horses. There's some thrills here, but it can be fun. The next obstacle, and it's probably the most versatile element in the obstacle course, is the little wooden bridge. Our little wooden bridge is 4 2x6s, nailed side by side about 8 feet long. And we set a fence post along either side to kind of define the bridge. It's narrow, and the horses will tend to naturally want to walk around it instead of over it. But by now, we should have tuned up our lateral control skills enough with all these different things that we can focus the horse on the bridge and get him curious about it and let him know, no, we're actually going to walk over it. And usually we set the bridge down at the very beginning so it doesn't move too much. We can walk forward over the bridge, end to end. We can walk over it sideways. We can back over the bridge. We can move the poles that are on either side farther apart. Sometimes the horses have a tough time when they want to cross the bridge sideways. And so we'll adjust the distance between the poles on either side and the bridge. You can set up so many different variable scenarios. If he tends to want to jump the bridge, then we'll set poles farther away from the bridge so that he has to step over the poles and then step over the bridge and then step over another pole. Use your imagination. If the horse is having a little trouble, don't get frustrated. Don't get uptight with the horse. Just change the obstacle a little bit so that the horse can take this elephant and eat it maybe a smaller bite at a time. Then once he gets confident at each one of these smaller elements, you put it all together and the horse can handle the bridge any direction that you want.
There. Okay, let's do it now. You can do it. Come on, buddy. You can eat the whole elephant now.
And then when we really want to have fun, we set the bridge up with just a little piece of wood underneath the middle so it rocks by an inch or so, and now he's got to deal with not only going over the bridge, but the feeling of a little bit of motion. Fallen log lane is the final footwork element in our typical bomb-proofing class. We have a lane set up bounded by some fence posts, and it's similar to a lot of rough country that you could be leading or riding your horse through. Along that lane, we'll set in kind of semi-random patterns, poles that are crosswise, and some of them are kind of up in the air at one end, some of them are flat. The idea of the arrangement of the poles is that the handler and the horse have to come in through somewhat of a serpentine. They have to plot their course through there, and they have to pay attention so that the horse isn't catching his foot against poles. Although we do set up the course so that if a horse does get caught in a small wedge between the two poles, one of them will roll easily away. We're not going to have a horse get snagged and then start throwing poles up in the air and panic. The horses will follow the handlers. The handlers will have to plan ahead as they go through fallen log lane. The horse will have to follow the cues, and the horse will discover if he follows the handler's cues, it's a lot easier to traverse this series of fallen logs. The horse needs to do that, but not just blindly go through a straight line, but work these elements and figure out where his feet are. And he knows that it's not a natural thing to start sticking your feet in these little wedges between poles that are down on the ground. If the horses get really good at this, we can either add more logs to the element, make it a little more complicated, or in some cases, we'll ask the horse to actually work off of verbal or hand cues. Lead rope over the horse's back so that you can get it if the horse has problems. But oftentimes, the horses by this time have gotten so much confidence in the handler, you can just kind of direct the horse with your intention. That's kind of a really cool place to be with your horse, because that's what you're going to want to do when you're going to ask your horse to load in the trailer and you don't want to have to lead it in. That's what you're going to do if you need to get your horse to go through a gate. You need your horse to work off your intention, work off your presence. We added a new obstacle this time that was brought to our attention by the Gift Horse Gang, which is a 4-H group, and Cole, the Ranger horse. And this was a large industrial tire with a plywood platform on the top. The natural instinct of the horse is, you see something like that, it's kind of like a boulder with a flat top. You're going to go around it, you're not going to go over it. And that will really test the communication ability between the handler and the horse. For the handler to be able to guide that horse and ask the horse to trust him enough to actually stand up on this platform, you're going to ask him to stand up with his front feet and then finally get his hind feet on there and stand on the tire and then step down. It's a long ways up and a long ways down for a horse.
There he goes. Nice job.
The handlers get to tune up their lateral control and their request for forward motion because the horse is instinctively going to want to duck one way or the other. They've got to read the horse and anticipate that the horse is going to go to the left or the right and make a correction. The other thing is the horse has to pay attention and start calculating where he is, because if he gets too close to the tire, he can't get his leg up on it because he's going to bump into it with his knee. So he has to be able to work off the handler's cue, adjust his own body position using his own mind, and then get up onto the tire. When you think about it, that tire is probably 10 times more difficult for the horse to fathom than stepping up into the trailer for the first time.
Good boy, man.
If the handlers work through all the elements and the horse is relaxed and the horse has confidence going over ground obstacles, through the visual obstacles that are either overhead or on either side of him, then the dimensions of the trailer are not quite so scary. The horse has developed confidence that the handler's not going to ask him to do anything he can't do. The handler has the confidence that he can ask the horse to do things, and the horse is most likely going to respond favorably rather than blow up and have an accident. So when they get to the trailer, even horses that absolutely have refused to go into the trailer, they can get into that familiar pattern of approaching an obstacle, correcting the lateral direction of the horse, asking for forward motion, and the horse will typically, within about 60 to 90 seconds of studying the trailer and going into the routine of calming and relaxing and preparation for, as with any other obstacle, clunk, clunk, right into the trailer they go. And the horse is relaxed. He's not frightened. He's curious about the trailer. The handler can go in, reassure the horse that this is really a good place to be. We'll have the horses go through the obstacle course on lead. And then once they become saddle horses, they can pack a saddle through the obstacle course. There's a certain amount of stress to that. It's not necessarily bad stress, but there's a little bit of stress there. The rider, that adds more stress. We want the horse to be able to process increasing stress load and still process the obstacles and still process that, you know, as long as I'm in tune with my handler, all this stuff is okay.